Dit is vir my baie lekker om vanoggend met Justin Chadwick te gesels en hy is die hoofuitvoerende beampte van Citrus Growers Association of Southern Africa. Justin, welcome to Grootplaas once again.
Morning, thanks for having me.
Justin, can we just have an overview when it comes to basically the current state of affairs, the latest news when it comes to the citrus industry?
No, thanks very much. So we obviously just starting our season. We're busy now with our estimates for the 2023 season. Next week we will finalize the Mandarin estimate. So we've got all the other sectors have finalized their estimates. It's not a huge growth. You know, we've been used to a lot of growth in the industry over the last few years, but this year we're looking at pretty much flat or slightly increases across the different sectors. It's a very, very difficult year to estimate because last year was a really bad year for the industry in terms of returns back on the farm, with 4 out of 5 farmers actually making a loss. And so growers are a lot more circumspect and a lot more careful with the estimating for 2023 in that there are a number of different counts and marginal fruit that shouldn't really be exported. So it's a very difficult year to estimate, probably the worst year that I've experienced. And so everybody's very careful. The outlook, obviously everybody's always hopeful at this time of the year.
Yes.
But we had, as I mentioned, a really bad 2022. Freight rates elevated, input costs elevated, the false codling moth issue in the EU, and various other aspects around logistics, etc. So we're hoping that 2023 will bring better returns back to the industry. And it's really a bit of a watershed year. You know, if we don't have a good year, and if everybody experiences the same as last year, then for sure there's going to be a lot of farmers that just won't survive, unfortunately.
What is the ideal circumstances for the citrus industry to prosper? If you just look broadly at the industry.
Well, I think the first thing is the freight rates. When I speak to growers across the board, they indicate that last year's losses were largely due to the fact that freight rates were elevated and elevated to extreme levels. So that's the first thing. Those have to come down substantially. They are coming down, but probably slower than we would like, and still at levels that won't allow positive returns into many markets. So I think that's the first fundamental. The other, which is sort of related, is the ports and the operation of the ports. We need the ports to operate efficiently and to get our fruit out in time. And then, I guess costs increases. A lot of it related to the war in Ukraine, which impacts on fertilizer prices, fuel prices, and various other things. So I think cost pressures definitely are there. The markets look good. The Northern Hemisphere is finishing off pretty early, which is a big factor for us. That changeover from the Northern to the Southern Hemisphere. If the Northern Hemisphere carries on into our season, it makes things difficult. But from all the statistics we're looking at, the Northern Hemisphere will be out of the market fairly early, which means that an open market for us to go into. Markets aren't used to price inflation, so you know generally you get the same price back from the market. But with the elevated costs, we're going to need to see some increase in returns or increase in prices to the consumer in those markets, which is sometimes difficult to absorb. So hopefully that will also change and we'll see some increases there. But generally everybody's fairly positive, but we just can't have the sort of the events that we've had in the last couple of years, and it just seems every year something different comes up. So we're waiting for that.
That is true. If we look at the local citrus industry in South Africa, how do we compare to other countries or the rest of the world at the moment?
So I think the important thing is to realize the different hemispheres. So,
Yeah.
we totally have a different season from the northern hemisphere. So Spain is the biggest exporter in the world, and obviously they're in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, in our season, we compete against South America. So that's Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, and Chile. And most of the competition is in what we call soft citrus or easy peelers or mandarin varieties, because that's what's grown in those countries and competes with us. And then in Argentina, we compete on the lemon market. And yeah, it seems that we're all facing similar type of challenges, elevated freight rates, elevated costs, etc. So, but I think we're fairly well placed. We dominate the orange sector. We're pretty much the only grapefruit exporter, and it's just us in Argentina and lemons. So the most competitive area is in mandarins, but we've got really good quality fruit. And if you look at what the growers are doing in terms of their production practices, etc., we've got good size fruit, and so it is sought after in the markets. And if we can just get it there the right time, and at the right cost, definitely the season looks good.
What exactly causes these? What are the factors that causes these challenges? Something like elevated freight rates. I mean, what leads up to it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously last year was unusual in terms of the impact that COVID still had in 2022 in terms of congestion around the world. So you had a lot of equipment, containers and ships that were held up at ports around the world. And obviously it's a supply and demand thing. So if you haven't got a whole lot of supply of containers and vessels to carry those containers, then the cost goes up. And unfortunately in South Africa, we've got a monopoly in terms of shipping. There are only two big shipping lines that ship out of South Africa. And they carry 85% of cargo from South Africa. So those two shipping lines could really just charge what they wanted because we didn't have alternatives. So one of the big things we need to look at is trying to bring competition into that space, because otherwise those two lines will carry on charging what they can, not because they should, but because they can.
Yeah, because they can. It's as simple as that. And if we look, I want to hear from you. How do you describe the industry's contribution to the agricultural sector in South Africa in general? It plays a huge role, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. The industry's been growing. I joined in 1999, and every year I've experienced growth. There are obviously a couple of little blimps along the way, but so at the moment we estimate that we employ about 120,000 people on farms and in pack houses. So that excludes all the downstream activities, which obviously is considerable. And that's 120,000 out of about, I think the agricultural employment's in the region of 860,000 or so. So it's a significant employer. And then in terms of foreign exchange earnings, we earn in the region of 30 billion rand a year. And what's really exciting about the industry is the growth prospects. We export 160 million cartons at the moment. In the next 10 years, our growth models, our long-term projections show that we'll increase by 100 million cartons over 10 years.
That's wonderful.
And that'll add another 100,000 employment opportunities and add another about 20 billion to the fiscus. So, but to make that happen, there are a number of projects that we're busy with. We need markets, that fruit has to go somewhere. And so we need as many markets as we can. We need to optimize our market access conditions, which obviously requires government to come to the table and really assist us in that respect. And then we need efficient logistics, and we need competitive shipping rates. So we've got a number of projects that we have in place at the moment to address all of those different aspects. We call it Vision 260, which is 260 million cartons by 2032. And we're working with all the other role players. I mean, the growers can produce the fruit and produce good quality fruit, but everybody else in the value chain has to come and play their role to make it happen.
And when we talk about future and future prospects and future opportunities, do you think the industry, the citrus industry, is ready or geared up for a tomorrow, for a bigger tomorrow? And I almost want to ask, is there practical plans set in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key question. So, I mean, just take, for example, cartons. So you go from 160 million cartons to 260 million cartons.
That's a lot.
Is there enough cardboard? Are there enough carton manufacturing capacity? So, that's just one example. I mean, you can go through all the inputs, the chemicals required, the fertilizer required, the electricity. I mean, we all know about load shedding.
Yes.
I mean, without energy, we're very, we use a lot of energy in terms of electricity for the irrigation on the farms. Our food goes into the cold chain very early on and needs to stay in the cold chain, and you don't need breaks in the cold chain. So that's all energy, all requires energy. So definitely there are a number of areas that we are worried about in the growth. But, the border market plan. So
there we go.
We have to do it, yeah.
That is true. Just basically, I think if we look at the citrus industry, it's still something to be excited about, especially when we look at obviously there's challenges. There's challenges in all the industries. But I'm very excited when it comes to the export potential there is. And I'm sure you guys are really working hard to make that happen, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we can make it happen, the benefits to the country and obviously to the growers and to the rural economy. If you look at where citrus is grown and all the little and dorps that depend upon the citrus industry for everything, have got potential to grow and really become prosperous. So we're very excited about the industry, but as I say, it's going to take a concerted effort by everybody in the value chain and by government and all the other service providers, etc., to actually assist us along the way and make sure that we actually reach those targets.
We've got around a minute and a half left. I just quickly want to ask, obviously, I think when it comes to a big industry in the sector, people tend to forget that, like you say now, there are communities that revolve around this product, like citrus. They are almost dependent. And if you could ask government to do something now, an immediate help or helpline or something to be done immediately, what would that be?
Yeah, unfortunately, the list is fairly long. But definitely, I mean, the thing about the industry is we don't need funding necessarily from government. I mean, obviously, the funding is required, and with the losses made last year, the banks need to step in and help. But it's really just, it's around market access to a large extent. And when I'm talking about market access, I'm talking about negotiating the entry requirements into the different markets, and it's also around tariffs. If you have a look at our tariff levels into Asia, they're much higher than our competitors who have free trade agreements, etc. in those countries. So, yeah, I think if we could engage DTRC and Delrad and DIRCO to assist in those areas, I think that would be our first wish.
Well, Justin, thank you so much, and thank you for your time, and good luck with the season ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity.